Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show that happens every Friday at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk about what people believe and why. Every week, I have a special guest, and this week is a very special guest. It is Exxtian Erin, a.k.a. Exxtian Erin, a.k.a. Erin. Erin,
Hi.
welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so today is a special day for you because today marks the 1 year anniversary of your deconversion from Christianity, right?
Yep, my official. Well, it was a couple days ago, but this week in particular, I.
No, it's today. It's
Oh,
today, Erin.
I'm
We're
so
just saying
sorry.
it's
I'm
today,
so sorry.
right? No. Yeah, so about sometime around this time last
It
year.
was definitely this week, sometime last year. Yeah.
You declared yourself sort of an atheist, and
I did. Yeah.
you've been posting on Twitter since then and doing your thing. Now, I've been following you on Twitter for a little bit now, but a couple months ago, you were recently talking to Seth Andrews about your deconversion story, and I did not know your deconversion story. And I heard your deconversion story, and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get you on Truth Wanted, because your story is pretty different from a lot of people's deconversion stories. So I wanted to kind of take the first couple minutes of the show here for you to kind of talk about this. But once again, folks, this is a live call-in show. Our lines are totally open right now, so please go ahead and call the number on screen if you're watching live. And Erin, where did it all start? What was your upbringing like?
My upbringing. So I grew up in a fairly small town in the prairies of Alberta, Saskatchewan, kind of along the border there. I spent half of my time at my mom's church, which was a Pentecostal church, and half the time at my dad's church, which was a Baptist church, because they were not together. Eventually, what I say is that the Pentecostal theology is kind of what stuck. And so that's where I formed my everything around, was the Pentecostal church. And so my family was really involved in the church. My dad was a deacon, which is like part of their administration. They were involved in everything. We were at the church 3-4 days a week. And then when it got to junior high school, it was youth group. And I went to 3 different youth groups in my hometown.
3 different youth groups.
Yes.
That's a lot of youth groups. Wait, hold on. Were you rotating, or were you going multiple times in the same week?
I was going multiple times in the same week.
What?
So, small town. And my high school friends, like the Christians were friends at school, but we weren't all from the same church, because our parents all came from different churches. So the churches knew each other well enough that they actually had their youth nights not on the same night. So we could go to youth group 3 times a week.
No way. Oh my. And see, where I grew up, youth group night, Wednesday night, always a Wednesday night. So if you were going to go to somebody's youth group, you had to choose. That was it. There was no other options.
That's how you really test the line. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I was in youth like Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, church on Sunday, and church on Sunday evenings usually.
Oh my God. That's a lot of church time. Okay. So this is your environment. This is the place you're growing up. You're going to church all the time. What happens next?
What happens next? Probably I would like to include the fact that I also spent a ton of time at camp as well. So when the summer seasons, I would also go to these different church camps. And if you've ever seen the movie Jesus Camp, it was not unlike that. A little less authoritarian, but there was when I look back now, it was so intense. There was such an intense pressure to
I've been to church camps. I worked church camps. Never been a part of a Pentecostal church camp. I imagine there's probably some big differences there.
There are, yeah. So I every summer I went to the Pentecostal camp and the Baptist camp, and they could not be more different. So the Pentecostal camp was very, very much focused on kind of that spiritual experience that you have, especially long, church services, lots and lots of energy, lots of jumping around, lots of altar calls, just a lot of engagement constantly. And then I would go to the Baptist camp, and it was a lot more like an actual kind of outdoorsy camp with some chapels. And so it was just night and day for me. And because I felt like that Pentecostal theology is what made sense to me, I guess, because I spent more of my time there. I spent most of my time at the Baptist camp trying to save the Baptist kids because I thought they were all going to hell.
But see, so I grew up around a lot of Baptists, and one of the favorite pastimes of Baptists is just talking smack about all the other denominations, especially Pentecostals. So like from the
so
Baptist
many
point
times
of view,
that I was in a cult from the
Baptist
kids, and I thought that was evidence of my faith, and that that was part of the persecution thing, and I was like, they haven't been reborn.
It's a never-ending war. It's a never-ending war that may never end. I don't know, but yeah, it's crazy. So okay, you're going to these camps and stuff. You're living your life, and eventually, you graduate high school. It's time to go to college for you. Where do you choose to go?
Well, first I was going to go to university. I wanted to go into nursing, but I had felt like I hadn't had enough spiritual. I didn't feel grounded in my faith because a little bit. It was just that overwhelming. What's up next? So I actually took a year off between like that year between high school and post-secondary, and I did a year of missionary work. So I joined a small group that was set out of so I'm in Canada. It was set in the prairies, and you spent a great deal of your time kind of practicing doing street ministry and that kind of thing. And then you would go overseas somewhere to go do missionary work. And that was a different experience for me. It really, it was fun, but it was also extremely hard because looking back now, like it was a very high control group. There was so many restrictions on everything we were doing. And I think that was the first time where I felt like I actively disliked my own religion for like a little while. So then after I got out of that, I went to Bible college for a year. Again, trying to do a 2-year program to go into nursing. I lasted 1 year at Bible college, and I actually did drop my program down because by even about halfway through my Bible college semester, I was struggling so badly with my doubts. But from there, I didn't press forward into the doubts. I just moved to a different province and started over.
Oh yeah. See, like I knew kids obviously that went to Christian colleges and stuff like that. I ended up going to a public university, but I always thought like, man, you had to be really dedicated to go to a Christian school. I don't know. I feel like the culture there is just very, very different. I think part of it too for me was I grew up around Baylor, and so I saw what Baylor was like, and I was just like, I'm not interested in that. So yeah, I bet you probably got some weird stories from that too. But like you had these doubts, you kind of pushed them away. You're kind of doing some other stuff. But somehow you're here today, right now, as an atheist. So what's going on there?
Well, so I moved to a different town, met a guy, ended up getting together with him for a few years. Didn't work out. There's way more to that story, but
sure.
And then I met who's my husband now, and we've been together for 10 years. And so I kind of just floated along in my, I wasn't in the Pentecostal church and I wasn't in the Baptist church. I was in this nice medium, there's the word, kind of non-denominational. They were friendly, but they weren't crazy, and they had a lot of good views. So we kind of stayed there for about 10 years. And my story really kind of revolves around my desire to kind of seek some mental health care because I had struggled with anxiety and depression quite a bit in my life. And I had always kind of gone to church first as a method to kind of work on that. And so about 2 years ago, I started seeing a counselor, and we started talking through some methods for, kind of coping with anxieties. I got really into mindfulness and meditation and that sort of thing. And I started following people online who were doing these guided meditations. And my story really starts with somebody who I had been following for a while. I had just followed a meditation of his, and then he had the next video said why I'm no longer a Christian. And I remember just kind of being stunned, thinking like, I've never heard of anybody leaving Christianity before. And so I was very nervous, but I did click the video and I watched it. And that was the first time I'd ever been confronted with these ideas that like Christianity is dogmatic, and that, then there's the ability to question and to ask questions and to doubt has always kind of been pushed down. And so this guy just had an 8-minute long deconversion kind of blip, and from there the YouTube algorithm. I think it was like 3 videos later, I was watching Matt Dillahunty.
That's a jump. That's a bit different from here's why I left my faith to no, you're wrong, right?
Yeah, so. I think it was. I think I just got really intrigued by this idea that people can leave their Christianity, and within those first few videos, and started watching deconversion stories, I was kind of starting to feel I could identify with the struggles that these people had while they were in the faith. So I spent a great deal of time trying to find how I could keep my faith, but also incorporate these ideas that in my mind were very like non-Christian, kind of went against what I was taught about human nature. So the idea of, mindfulness and self-love and acceptance and all these kind of things that we know now are so helpful with the help of modern psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy and that sort of thing. I wanted to somehow stay a Christian, but still
keep these ideas together, right? Because they made sense. Like they helped you, and it was just like, how do you incorporate that into a worldview that holds it all together?
It teaches very much of like this self-denial and this one of the ideas is like this: the more of you and less of me. This idea of becoming very, very small and becoming very meek and humble, and those things just weren't jiving really with what I was learning about how to take care of myself mentally. And so I just kept pushing through the questions, and I honestly did think that if I just looked just far enough, I'd find right where I stood in the middle. But I was totally wrong. The questions just kept on coming, and the further I got in, the more intense. I was very intense about trying to figure it out. And so my deconversion happened quite quickly after that, because I kind of went gung-ho into the research and the books and the podcasts, and ended up on the completely opposite side of what I thought I would.
Yeah, and I actually didn't know this before we were talking before the show, but you actually watched my deconversion story too. Yeah, that's wild, because I've heard atheists say, "Oh, they've watched my story." You're the first person I've heard that's watched it while they were a Christian.
I was still a Christian when I watched your first interview with Anthony, and I was still at that place where I couldn't quite figure out who I agreed with, and I was listening to you and your friends talking, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I've always been taught as well. It's all comes down to faith, and it is very personal. And like I was kind of agreeing with that, and that was a pretty good, like a good interview. So somewhere in the middle, I had scrolled down to the comments, and I saw somebody wrote, "There's more. You have to go check out his next interview. Like he does another one. He does another one." And then so I clicked on the next one, scrolled down the comments. They're like, "Dude, this guy has his own show now." And I was just like,
yeah, kind of snowballed a little bit after that. But
so to see somebody that thought and processed things pretty like identical to how I did, and to see you make that shift, and for me that shift happened over an hour and a half. I don't know. I felt that, and I was like, that's amazing that somebody can change their beliefs. I didn't know people could change their views, couldn't change their opinions. I thought it was
I didn't know.
For me.
I didn't know people could change it kind of as radically as I did either. So I guess that's why we do what we do now. Because we want to show people, hey, you totally can. But
you totally can.
Now, this next part of your story, and I want to try to kind of get to it here before we get to calls, I think is what's not that your story isn't fascinating. It is fascinating to look and see all the 3 youth groups thing. That's wild. That's just nuts. But like you got into some stuff, because I did this kind of a similar thing you did, where it was like, oh, my Christianity became more liberal Christianity before it was completely gone. I did kind of incorporate a lot of these ideas, but you went in a different direction, and I want to hear a bit more about that.
So kind of at the beginning of my search for peace and mental health, I was kind of looking at everything. I still very strongly identified as a Christian, but I was looking at different ways that people have, just basically the self-help category of the internet. I landed there for a while, and I spent a good a few months getting really wrapped up in different types of self-help that are not helpful. So we're talking like New Age movements, and I got wrapped up in conspiracy theories like ancient aliens, and just all the different things that they just grabbed a hold of me. I was like, this makes way more sense. But then I got to the next one and I'm like, no, but this makes way more sense. And then I got into chakras and healing and crystals. And I feel like I just did this huge loop around all the other options on how to take care of myself, but still stay spiritual, kind of. And I can honestly say that I still felt like I was a Christian, but I also believed in ancient aliens for a while, to the point where I was convinced that I was an alien. But it wasn't until you get far enough into I didn't get into skepticism right away, basically.
Can I ask you how you were convinced that you were an alien? What was the thought process there?
So it came down to this conspiracy theory about the blood types. So I have a very strange blood type. I think it's AB negative. And if you look up AB negative, you're definitely, like, on the internet, you'll find tons of articles where you are literally seeded by alien DNA. So you're part human, you're a hybrid. And I just dug into that for like quite a while. I thought, and you're reading all these things, and it's kind of the Barnum statements of like, if you are AB negative, like, do you ever feel kind of lost in this world? Do you ever feel a little bit alienated? Do you ever feel like you don't quite you got that imposter syndrome? And I was like, yeah, I totally have that.
Yeah, so does everybody in their early 20s or whatever. Yeah, like,
yeah, exactly,
I don't know how old you were at this point, but like, yeah, like everybody's felt that for sure.
So there was my ability to confirm my suspicions was just very all over the place.
Yeah, and like, side note, this is a sidebar, but like, this is why I'm super against like those quizzes and stuff. I don't know, just stuff in general where it's like, oh, it's just entertainment and stuff like that. Like, no, people do take that seriously. Like, that's kind of a
I
thing.
got really into personality testing, into the Myers-Briggs and the anagrams, and like I was looking, and now I just see I was just looking for anything to make sense, because nothing was making sense to me anymore, and so I was looking at everything. And it wasn't really until I don't remember when it started, when I started realizing that there was a difference between atheism and skepticism, is when I kind of turned, some of these new things around onto my not like deeply held beliefs, but the ones that I was really excited about. I turned it around on there, and I realized that I didn't have any better reason to believe these things either.
Yeah, I think that's very relatable to a lot of people's experiences, I think, and I can speak to this too. It's like, oh, like, I didn't even have a proper idea of what atheism even was.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what that actually meant. I think if you look at my video, I say something like atheism is a belief in science or something bullshit. That's not real. Like, that's not how the community actually operates. But you're taught your whole life what an atheist is. And how terrible they are and awful, but you're not actually, there's no real information of substance that comes from a pulpit that I've seen about atheism. I've never been to a sermon, and I've been to many, that has described atheism in any accurate sense of that word, or at least what the community uses. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had the firm kind of belief that atheists were just deceived by the devil, because in my background, it was all about the spiritual warfare. So I'd never heard this philosophical kind of concrete atheists, say there is no God. I just heard atheists are just totally deceived by the devil. So you can't really trust them.
Yeah, for sure. So
that was hard to break out of.
So you went from thinking you were a Pleiadian to and all this kind of other stuff too, the crystal healing and stuff like that, to just finding this atheist identity. Was that just from reading books or watching certain YouTube videos, or like, what was the influence there?
The influence there, obviously, went to YouTube, and I found so many amazing content creators that really helped me dismantle my beliefs. It kind of somewhere in the mix of listening to Apologia and Prophet of Zod, I think it was somewhere in there, and Holy Kool-Aid as well, because they kind of had that same background as me. I felt like I connected with their stuff. And then there was a video by Cosmic Skeptic where he explains like, I think it's called Atheist Know Thyself. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, wow, I do fall into that category now. And then the challenge there is then to like, no, but are you going to use the label? And it took me a few months after having that moment where I looked myself in the mirror. It took me another 4 or 5 months to start even posting online. But I did, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, like the one time the YouTube algorithm may have done some good for some people, right? Yeah. Instead of leading them down conspiracy rabbit holes, maybe there is the, because I remember when I was looking up stuff on YouTube, I was looking up like the first time I had heard like the Kalam arguments and stuff like that. Yeah. At first I was getting apologist stuff, but even if you're looking at that stuff, at least at the time, the related videos started to become like atheist response videos and stuff. Yeah. And I think that's how kind of I started to get down that rabbit hole a bit. Yeah.
Debates too. Like I watched a bunch of debates, and I still remember saying to my husband, like, I'm watching this debate between a Christian and an atheist, because I said I want to be an educated hater. Actually, it was being kind of
an joking. Educated hater. Damn, so, that's a t-shirt right there. I like that.
And I got to the end of, I think it was this, like, my first one, and I was like, damn it, why did they make so much sense? That made so much more sense. And I think it was Matt Dillahunty again. And I think I watched probably every major debate, and I couldn't deny the fact that I just totally agreed with the atheist every time.
Yeah. And so, we didn't touch on this, but at this point you are married at this point. And so what was that like, having a family and having a change in your beliefs?
Not good at first. I definitely had this kind of flailing about phase, I kind of call it, where I hadn't stepped out of the faith yet, but I was really struggling with feeling, I guess most people would call it the angry atheist phase, even though I didn't identify as an atheist at the point. I was an angry deconstructor. Yeah. And so I spent a lot of time kind of badgering my husband for like, well, what do you think? Because he actually has some background in ministry. So I hounded him for answers, and it wasn't very long after doing that I realized, like, this is totally not helping. This isn't helping my process. This is really hurtful to him. I should stop doing this. So I took my battle, my internal battle, online, and also I found a therapist that helped me work through it.
Yeah, there's the stereotype of the angry atheist phase is true. It's absolutely true.
But people like, we're hurting.
Yeah, like that's what people don't get about this, right? Like they see it as, something to be made fun of because you're going through a phase. It's like, no, but that phase though, like that's like you said, that's a painful process.
That's a thing that's happening. It's not. That's why I like to call it the flailing about phase, because like I was panicked, and I was angry, and I was frustrated, and I was taking it out, like just in ways that were not helpful, and I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time. But I think that
when you learned that your whole worldview is constructed on lies, and even more so for you, I would think, because I was not as fundamentalist as you. I can't even imagine what it was like to go even that far. Like there's something to be said about that. What does that say about the way that we grew up, where that was our response to this?
I had a hard time. I felt like I really wanted to direct my anger towards. I had very particular experiences in my mind where I can look back now and I'm like, wow, that was abusive. It's emotionally abusive. That's psychologically abusive. These experiences were traumatizing for me. And so I mean, for the most part, I've just kind of spoken out about it instead. And I have done the work with like a trauma-informed counselor, because it was traumatizing. It was the realization that it was traumatizing, and accepting that it was traumatizing, and then working through it, and then going one step further and realizing that the people who maybe had done abused in the system, because they also were taught the same thing. So I couldn't keep my anger directed at just that next level up. I expanded it out to now my frustration was against the doctrine itself, not just the people
against the system. Putting the system on trial. Yeah. No, I like it. And that's what I think is a good motivation to do what we do. It's not about, we're not angry at, most of us aren't angry at particular individuals because they hurt us in specific ways. Although we've all been hurt by individuals. Like, we are mad at the entire system that brought us here. And like, that's what we're trying to deconstruct. That's what we call out. And that's what we have these conversations for. It's really important to us because yes, we were, victims of that system. And, but like, we're not trying to stay as victims. We're trying to reach out and help others and talk to people about this and get people on their way. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, hey, maybe some of this stuff is making sense, feel free to call in because that's what we're here for. But also, this is Truth Wanted, folks. Anything can happen on this show. So I want to go ahead and start going to calls right now, actually, if that's okay with you, Erin.
Yep, I'm ready.
Well, cool. Well, first, before we get to calls, though, I do want to put a call to action out there. Haha. If you notice, I got this cool mic stands on right now, and we've been making a lot of upgrades to my home studio system here, and that is because of you guys that donate to this show on Patreon. So patreon.com/truthwanted is the link to that. I know some of you guys probably wonder, where else does that money go? Well, it goes towards upgrading stuff like this and doing all kinds of stuff. So if you want to show the atheist community of Austin, hey, Truth Wanted is a project worth investing in, please consider donating to that Patreon. I really appreciate it, you guys. It means a lot to me that you guys watch and support this show. It's really, really cool. And we get to have cool guests like Erin come on and talk about their stories. But for now, I think it's time that we go ahead and take some calls. Let's get to it. First, I want to get to Kevin, who is calling in from New York. Kevin, what is going on?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. It's really good to talk to you again. Now, I wanted to bring up the subject of evolution for you guys because I have some personal problems with it. Now, I'm going to get right to it. The thing having to do with
before you get into it, Kevin, is there any way you could eliminate some of the background noise? Because we are picking up a little bit of that.
Oh, yes. I apologize for that. Is it any better right now?
Sounds better right now. Yeah. I'm hearing some breathing, though, and some moving around. Are you walking outside? Is there a place you can get to where you can stop for a sec?
Yes, it'll take me a couple minutes, so I apologize for that. Now, having to do with evolution, a great place to start is obviously Charles Darwin, but I wanted to sort of focus on his 1859 book, Origin of Species.
Hey, I'm going to stop you right there, Kevin. I think actually, despite what you might think, I actually think Charles Darwin is not a good place to start because evolution has been happening long before Charles Darwin's time. And we've evolved some of our own ideas about evolution since Charles Darwin's time. So Charles Darwin could have wrote that whole book and everything could have been wrong in it. But the facts that we know about today about evolution, we don't need that book at all to know. It comes from our observations and it comes from experimentations that we've done as well.
That is true, but isn't he sort of the go-to for? The basis.
Really?
You can get an entire biology education without picking up a single one of Charles Darwin's writings. Yeah.
Well, even with that said, I still wanted to talk about that book because while many people are already familiar with his work, specifically the 1859 book, Origin of Species.
Well, let me ask. I'm sorry, Kevin, because you're so ready to get to this point, and I understand that. But like, I just want to ask you, like, why does anything in that book have to matter to us right now as what we currently believe? Because again, like, I get it. He had some ideas, and yeah, you could definitely look at some stuff that didn't pan out to be true, and that people don't follow today's. But like, we're not using that as Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species isn't our Bible. right? Like we're not referencing it for our current understandings of evolution. So why is this book so central to the argument that you have to make to disprove evolution or to, you know, deconstruct evolution?
I just wanted to point out some possible biases that even he had way back then.
Of course he had
Origin of the Species wasn't the full title of this book. The full title was actually The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle of Life.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely had some. I mean, his ideas about race weren't as. I don't think they're as bad as people made it out to be at the time. I think other people, like his cousin, took some things and made it to be even worse. But again, yeah, I get it. There's a lot of people who have taken the ideas of evolution and stuff and use it to build this kind of history of scientific racism, as they call it, which I wish it even wasn't called that, because it's not scientific, right? It's pseudoscientific. I just read a book about this recently, and I can't remember the title, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole history of some of the bad ideas that come from this. But again, I have to emphasize this point. Nothing in that book, you could point out every single flaw in The Origin of Species. It's not going to change my mind about evolution being true or not.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, even with that, another very small point I wanted to bring up was that, yes or no, one of the bases of that, one of the things that we learned from evolution is that a very long time ago, simple cell organisms mutated to become complex life. Now, the issue I have with that is that mutations itself seem to be a scrambling of information, in which it always seems to result in bad things happening. So I don't buy that.
No,
we've mutated things.
That's not true at all. I don't know if you, Kevin, how much have you looked into any modern scientific, you know, biology book on evolution? Because where are you getting the information that mutations always happen and turn into bad things?
Well, for an example, I am by no means an expert in this, but for an example, even the topic of how certain cells, certain bacteria, I guess you could say, become drug resistant.
Okay, well, it's not due to not what I asked,
information,
right?
Through genetic material.
Look, but even Charles Darwin, did you read Origin of Species? Because like a big thing in his book was like the benefits of some of these mutations. Remember the finches, right? Like the finches had the different beak sizes because they were taking in a different food sources wherever they were at.
Yes.
Right. So like there's...
What is the question?
The word mutation? Because I mean, isn't the information from geneticists saying that every time a mutation happens, it ends up being a loss of information? That's why some cells,
not right.
when they take bacteria,
nope, that's a creationist talking point, right? This argument from, you know, talking about the loss of information, you will only see that in young Earth creationist books. You will not see that in any modern scientific literature on the topic of evolution, because that's not really how they talk about evolution. You know, like, again, the kind of mutations and changes they're talking about can be simple or complex, because what we observe in the DNA doesn't necessarily affect, you know, what we see in the phenotypes and you know, what we see happening in DNA is affecting other parts of the cells and other parts of the structures that happen. So it's not always going to be a loss. And in fact, when DNA, or a gain, and when DNA and RNA, well, RNA replication first. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a whole science lesson, but like there are happenstances where the DNA kind of doubles on itself and for, you know, if you want to talk about information, like stuff is gained through these processes all the time. It's not a entirely, I guess, lossful process. I think a great video on this topic that talks about it more, if you're interested, is a YouTube channel called Stated Clearly that kind of goes more into this argument specifically. I'm not a biologist by trade, and again, evolution was always something that never really bothered me too much. I didn't get into the young earth creationist stuff, but I think Erin could probably tell you a bit about it too, maybe, right?
Yeah, I mean, learning about how the adaptations, like how there's certain things that we lost, but we gained, and it's not always like this forward progression of better, or worse, depending on how you're looking at it. I do feel like, like you were saying, like it's the language around it. Like that's not actually what a mutation is. It's a small change, or it's a smaller or larger change, but over long periods of time, and it's just whatever is that useful or beneficial for that group at that time. So it can be kind of a lucky mutation if you look at it that way.
Yeah,
it's not always going negatively, obviously.
Yeah, but I guess my point was, in the process of replication, yeah, there can be new amino acids added and stuff, and new I guess information in that sense happens. But again, that's not the language that biologists use.
Yeah,
for that.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm going to leave you with one last thing, then I'll conclude my call.
Okay.
This one last thing really made me think. Just the idea of evolution from, which is evolving from something. I heard the theory that this actually may lay the groundwork for believing that that we evolved from something to becoming something through the process of evolution. Now, that might be a little vague, but I think that might lead into new age thinkings right there.
Yeah. I know what you're trying to say. Absolutely. And Erin definitely knows what you're trying to say.
I was just going to say, can you tell me more about that? Like the law of attraction kind of thing?
Well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but like the misuse of the language of evolution, of coming from something to beyond something, like there's this kind of talk in new age communities about how we're evolving to become our higher beings, like we're becoming,
evolving to the fourth dimension any day now.
Yeah, this kind of thing. When like evolution is not a straightforward process where every time a mutation happens, something better happens, right? Like as we discussed, it's just a change in your environment.
I can't control what happens next in the next generation, like with what kind of genetic material I'm passing on to my kids. I can't affect that in any kind of meaningful way just by wishful thinking, or
not currently.
Till
we get the CRISPR stuff.
CRISPR maybe, but as it is right now, I can't focus my energy and kind of will it to happen in any kind of way.
Yeah, it's a limitation of our language to say we came from something to what we are now, because the truth is, every time we reproduce, evolution is happening.
Yeah, it's happening. Right
but that's just humans are bad at talking about science sometimes, because we're just
it is really hard though to use the language of evolution through a creationist lens, because it really is this idea of like one creature coming from a different creature, when that's not what's going on.
Yeah,
that's not, you'll never hear that at a young earth event. They will never say that, if you were to look on the whole line of the evolutionary chain, that there would be at one point that you can say like, okay, now we have Homo sapiens sapien. It's that moving target it's the language problem and the way that they paint the picture. And until you really get out of that bubble and look at what biologists and they're actually saying, you need to understand how they explain it, because it's totally different. Yeah, so
it looks like Kevin dropped in the middle of us talking to him, but that's fine. I hope he got something out of it. I feel kind of dumb now, because I'm not up to. It's been a minute since I've looked at evolution stuff and some of the arguments for that.
I'm no scientist. I don't.
But I have all my other YouTube friends who are really into it will grill me on it. But like it's never been my super big expertise, at least in explanations for that kind of stuff, because it was just never a problem for me. It was never like a thing I had to overcome, so I didn't have to study it as hard. But yeah, Yeah, I don't know. I hopefully that was a sufficient enough explanation for you, and hopefully the resources we were talking about will be useful for you. But until then, we got another call that I want to get to. We're going international with this one. We're talking to Mike from Germany. Mike, what is going on?
Hello, Erin. Hello, Dan.
Hi.
Well,
Hey.
yeah, hi. It's quite simple, really. I'm essentially an atheist, always have been, and since, when it comes to talk about morality and everything, we say how important empathy is. My question would be, what does it actually feel like to believe? Do you have, a secular way to express that?
Interesting.
That's a great question.
I have no idea.
Well, so I'll go first, and then I'll let Erin explain, because I think every believer is probably going to answer this differently, right? You're taught in Christianity, at least the Christianity I grew up with, that you have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe. Okay. And so the interactions of your daily life, you're going to think, God is watching you. God is doing something in your life. You have to interpret the signs and see what he's doing versus, what just kind of happens. And so the way I grew up was, you can pray for things and God may or may not answer them, which, is all the possibilities of anything. Right. But, like the idea is like you're on your best behavior because you know that you have to be a Christian, and what it means to be a Christian is to follow these certain rules and to be in part of this certain community. And there's it's a lifestyle choice, I guess. It's a lifestyle that you try to live, but also, I guess, a philosophy as well, because you're actively doing things and not thinking about certain things because the group that you're with is kind of telling you to do it. I imagine it's pretty similar to what a lot of people in cults probably feel like. But, the authoritarian nature of your beliefs are going to vary depending on which kind of Christianity you follow. I would say, Erin, that your Christianity was much more authoritarian than mine.
It's definitely, I would explain a little bit differently for me. And I think for me, believing was constantly trying to map on the things that my, people that I loved and respected, parents, pastors, the things that they told me were true about reality, and trying to get it to map onto what was actually happening. And for me, I had a lot of anxiety about it because so many things that I was taught to believe, and I did believe it because I really, really trusted the people who were telling me, these authority figures over me. I believed them. I trusted them. They had to be telling the truth. That's kind of how it was. So for me, what it felt like to believe was knowing that this thing was true, but that I couldn't really rely on it, and I had to really work to make it fit into my day to day, and that I never quite had that assurance that other people had. So I always felt like I was kind of somewhere falling behind because I always seemed to have this one area of doubt. And so I thought there was something wrong with me. So I was very self-critical. And then, Dan mentioned it, like kind of like doing things as part of the choice of your lifestyle, and constantly running up against these things that you're told are sinful, but yet it seems to be so natural human nature. So thought patterns and things like that, kind of constantly checking yourself for that. And that can be like a kind of a state of hypervigilance, I would say, where you're almost down, you get down on yourself. As soon as you catch yourself thinking or doing something that you've been told is sinful, and you're like, I didn't have any control over that. it happened, and so
it's like
it's confusing to me.
You are told specific situations, right? And you're told how you're supposed to respond in specific situations. And so when you get to those situations, the pressure is on for you to do things a certain way. So if somebody's talking smack about Jesus, you're not supposed to participate, and or you're supposed to rebuke someone for that. And that's something you're taught. Or another thing, if you have lustful thoughts of a woman or man, you're supposed to abstain from that and not act on that and not develop any kind of relationship outside of what would be expected from a young Christian couple, which means anywhere between no kissing before marriage to even no hand holding. I don't know. Like there's some places that are like that, but like it's about controlling your actions at the end of the day. Like it's about keeping the faith. Keeping the faith.
The thing you had mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I've heard the term God bumps being used as opposed to goosebumps when it comes to specific religious feelings of whatever revelation, things like that. Have you ever had anything like that? I mean, I'm asking you now. You're not asking me, but hey, let's turn this around.
Absolutely, I have. I grew up in a very charismatic church, so the heavy emphasis on that spiritual experience, the goosebumps, the God bumps. So when the music is going and there's an emotional message going on, and somebody comes up to you and says, like, "You know what? Can I pray for you?" Those things, those are just experiences that give you the chills, that give you that kind of like transcendent kind of experience. So one of the things that I realized when I was coming out of it was that I went to a concert a year and a half ago, and I had a spiritual experience at this concert, and I, for the life of me, could not think about how that was any different than my altar call experiences. It's the same thing for me.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
Okay. When I tell you, when I worked at a Christian camp, right, like that was an eye-opening experience in the sense of, oh yeah, that come to Jesus night that people talk about, that's designed on purpose. 100%. 100%. They will actively tell you, yeah, this is the come to Jesus night. And what happens is they play the sad songs that make you think about your sin, and they turn the lights down real low. And the guy comes out on stage with the acoustic guitar, and he's just slowly talking to you.
Got the prayer chords going on.
It's programmed. It's a programmed message. Like it's designed that way. By humans, not by God. It's not a God influencing that experience. That's human beings who figured out tricks to psychology that help people, believe the thing that you're talking about. Yeah.
The other thing that I found very fascinating on my way out of this was realizing how much personal, like how much prayer and these God bumps things is just a form of ASMR.
Yeah, that's true too.
But
I didn't think about that, but
there's so many things that map on psychologically to these experiences that are that most people who are in a faith think that they can only experience in those moments at church, and they would never even consider trying to have those experiences, those feel good transcendental. I always get that word.
And again, like when you're like, of my experience with a camp, right? When you're literally out there and you see the same thing 10 times, you see the same set over and over and over again. Like it stops becoming a unique phenomenon, and it's a process. It is a factory process.
And especially if you've ever been involved in the worship band. I don't know if you did, Dan, at all. I was on the worship band. I played bass guitar in the worship band. When you start to get behind that curtain and you start realizing how these services are put together and how they line up their the song choice to the lighting to the music to the message, it's just very constructed.
To be fair, that varies from church congregation to church congregation, but the bigger churches, every time, no doubt, they're thinking about this stuff. The music director, that's why they hire them, to do that kind of stuff. But anyway, hopefully, Mike, that answers some of your questions.
That has helped a lot. And if I want God bumps now, all I need is to turn on Pink Floyd, turn on my headphones, and listen to Wish You Were Here.
Whatever gives you that goosebump feeling, that's the Holy Spirit.
I
have found the Holy Spirit, so thanks for that.
There you go, Mike.
Out on anything.
Glad you found it for you, and good luck to your days as a Christian now. I guess he has the Holy Spirit, right? But speaking of Christian, we actually have a Christian that wants to talk to us. This is, I believe it's Mun from Australia. Please tell me if I'm not pronouncing that right. Mun, what's going on?
I'm pretty good. It's Moon, but it's just my nickname.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for calling Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Yeah. The question I've always said is like, I'm a Christian and I still believe in God. And I'm always wondering, it's like, why these days people are so sometimes quick to dismiss their faith. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Elaborate
Sorry,
on
what
that.
was that?
Elaborate on that. What do you mean?
Because for me, I'm a little bit different from like what I was hearing. For me, what I try to do is like, I'm not one of those people who's like, I try to consider what, like everything else, and then come to a decision. And one of the things that I do is I try to seek whatever the truth, and then I try to follow that truth, because I'm one person who believes like we came from somewhere and we go somewhere. So for me, it's like every time I'm always hearing like some of these conversations, especially with a lot of some of these conversations, I kind of feel like some people, they just like are quick to just like dismiss Christianity, and they don't really try to really dive deeper and try to understand why, or try to answer some of the questions. Because
well,
in my case, I'm still a Christian, and let
me tell you this. You know, I understand. Sorry, we're getting a little bit of some audio troubles here, but yeah, I understand from if you're just watching this show from the first time. I don't know how much you've seen this show or other productions from the ACA. You know, it probably looks like, oh wow, why are these guys so quick to dismiss what they're hearing here? You know, aren't they willing to kind of look into this stuff? And the truth is, man, we've looked into this stuff, and for my case, years now. I've been doing this show for 2 years, but even before that, I took at least a year for me to really fully deconstruct my Christian faith. If you were here at the top of this show, Erin was just telling her story. I mean, she grew up as a Christian, and she was a Christian longer than I've been alive, you know? And so like, that tells you a lot about, you know, the kind of people that we have in our community. I understand that, from looking on the outside, it may have that appearance of, whoa, we're really quick. But if you really listen to us and hear our stories, like, not only have we looked into this, but we were believers hardcore a lot of times, and we had to discard our beliefs because we realized we couldn't justify them. You know, as much as I would love to say, I come from a creator, like this is where I'm from, and I have this belief in a higher power. It's not something I can say I believe in honestly anymore, because I don't. And I'd rather be honest about that disbelief than pretend and believe something that I don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, I missed out a little bit on that one.
So, Mon, tell me about yourself here, because you say you're still a Christian. You say you have a God belief. What convinces you that the Christian God is real? I'd be curious to know.
For me, it's more to do with like sort of. For me, the thing that convinces me every day, it's when I look at like our purpose for being here and where we came from. And then at the same time, thinking about like how everyone dies and what happens to us after we die.
How do you know that something happens to us after we die?
Pardon?
How do you know that something happens to us after we die?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly the question. But like, that's when I was thinking, because I used to really like go deep into like, I also used to have like a lot of questions about Christianity. I was one of those people like, I would question almost every aspect of it like that. And then one thing, like, that's the question, when I was asking myself what happens to us when we die, that's like when I came up to this point of like, I think there's there's a mystery about death, and that's when you know everything, because no one really knows what happens when you die, unless, because no one has died and come back. So it's like when you die, whatever the truth was, it's gonna like, you're gonna know it then, and it's like there's no way back. Like
maybe, but
how do you know anything happens at all after you die?
Yeah, what if nothing happens?
What is your, you know, the thing that convinces you that anything about our personality and our who we are as a person? What is like your most convincing piece that tells you that anything happens after?
The thing that tells me the most that something happens after is the fact, it's just that fact, that mystery that say we die and something happens to us. And then if because of that, that means like there is one truth to what happens to people when they die. It's either, that's exactly all right. Like you can either just go into nothing, or the Hindus could be right too. You can be reincarnated, or Christians could be right too. You could go to heaven or hell depending on what you did on earth, right? Or what you believed in.
Sure. So I would say, Mun, as
life.
You know, you're watching a show, so our take on this, I would say, generally as atheists, is you're right. Like we have no idea exactly what happens to the person of us as we die. We have some ideas. We've observed death. We've seen other people die, and it doesn't look like anything happens. But the specific claims of different religions, right? We have no way of really testing a lot of those beliefs to be true or not, because they're unfalsifiable. There's no real way for us to like put somebody in a lab and have them tell us what happens, because like they're dead, right? So you know, we would reserve any belief on anything that happens to us after we die, because we just really don't have any evidence for it. And another thing you said earlier, Mun, that I was going to ask you about was, you know, you said that we have a purpose, and that's another thing that a lot of atheists, you know, in general, would say that, yeah, we're not sure that we even have a purpose, because a purpose implies that there was a creator for us that, you know, or some sort of creation that intended something for us. And we don't get that far either, because we, as far as we know, we haven't seen any evidence of it, right?
Or at least any kind of objective purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose that we speak of usually refers to the ones that we have given our own lives. Yeah.
Yeah. We can certainly construct a purpose for ourselves, but a God-given purpose, that's kind of off the table for us.
And for me, well, it can be seen that way as well. But for me, basically, what I look at when I was looking at like origin and purpose, it's sort of this idea, like, because I love science, right? And I study science, like, it's one of my things that I used to love. And when I was looking at it, and you start looking at some of the people who like pioneered science, you know, like Isaac Newton, like people like Tesla, people like Albert Einstein, and some of the statements they would make, and also when they're uncovering like some of the things in the universe, you just see like this order where it's like things are like working like a clock. Where it's like nothing can go out of place. It's not like anything. It's not like some random occurrence thing. It's almost like everything was designed to a specific to meet like a specific purpose of it.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's absolutely awe-inspiring when you look at those kind of those aspects of the nature of reality. It's absolutely it's beautiful and it's inspiring. So I do find it kind of tricky when people say that, like, you know, as an atheist, or you don't have any purpose, but I see a ton of purpose and even just beauty and awe in those kind of things, like those observations that you're making right now.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the illusion that things have this kind of order. I mean, like, it's not an illusion, right? We do see that there is like there are patterns that we can see, you know, that seems to bear out. But like the idea that everything is designed in some sort of way, you know, like that's where we would have trouble with that, because we don't necessarily see that a God is required for there to be, you know, laws of physics. You know, it doesn't seem like that has to be necessary to us, only because, well, one, we haven't really seen evidence of a God, and if the only evidence we have is that the universe seems ordered, that doesn't really tell us anything about that God or what he is or what he can do, or you know, I mean, I guess that he can make a universe, but like it really doesn't give us a lot of information there. So and some of those folks that you pointed out, I must say, by the way, Einstein, Newton, they were not your typical Christians. In fact, Einstein, I believe, was not a Christian, more of a deist, and Newton, he had some weird ideas, but yeah, like you know, they grew up in a religious culture that taught them to have reverence for things and to attribute things to the divine. And I think that's why you see that in a lot of our great thinkers of history. But I could definitely tell you some great thinkers of history that didn't have that worldview as well. So
But also, when it comes to like this side, there's also like an interesting part that I'd always find, because like as I say, I always search for these things because it's something that I love interest. It's always interests me. But there was also a part where it's like I would always ask myself when it comes to like creation, because I've heard stories about the Big Bang, and like there are certain parts of it that I agree with. And then there are certain parts I'm just like, I don't know. It's sort of like crossing into the realm of like, this is now a belief rather than maybe somebody talking of like what actually happened. But like one of the other things, because I remember.
Well, I want to ask you about that real quick. Do you think there's parts of the Big Bang that aren't based on evidence? Like parts of the descriptions of the Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
What parts?
There's some, like for the parts, like for me when I was thinking, like just because in the same sense, people would ask, well, where did God come from? Because we always say, he was there and he existed. Therefore, because he existed, out of him all things were created. The same thing, sometimes I always wonder about Big Bang, where they say it's like there was a point of singularity, or they'll say there were just two subatomic. That's the stories of it. Two subatomic particles that just came together, and then when they collided, then there was this Big Bang which releases so much like energy, and out of that, then upon millions and billions of years, creation started to occur away.
I don't want to be that guy, but that's not what the Big Bang Theory is.
Oh, well, that's what I was taught like most of the time. So
yeah. So like subatomic particles weren't even a thing yet.
Yeah.
Like there's a I'm sorry, I don't have time to really go into in depth on the Big Bang on this show because we got some other callers and it's a whole thing. And I'm certainly not the most qualified person to talk about the intricacies of it, but my suggestion to you, Mun, is look into what the Big Bang really is. Get a PBS video on that, and see if what you see in that video is different from what you remember about being taught about the Big Bang. I think this is a pretty common problem, Mun, and this isn't unique to you. I think a lot of people have an idea of what the Big Bang is, but really actually isn't what the scientists who have been studying this for years and years are actually saying. Because we hear about it and we hear it from somebody else and we get a vague idea. I certainly thought the Big Bang was just an explosion that happened at the beginning of the universe, but it's not even, it's more than just that. Like, it's not even, because an explosion implies that it has, anyway, it's a whole thing. I suggest going into that.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Because I want to be sure that you have, an accurate idea of what we're talking about when we talk about the Big Bang. So unfortunately, I do have some other calls I want to get to, but I would love for you to call again sometime, Mun. If you watch that video or if you have some other questions to ask us, I'd be down to talk again. What do you think? Oh, Mun, you still there? Okay, I'm not hearing anything from you, Mun, but hopefully if you are there and you can hear us, again, would like to hear back from you. That was kind of interesting because nothing that was said there was, there's no citations of the Bible, really. There's no, talking points that I've heard from, I don't know. It was kind of a more, it's something that I expect from a Christian Australian rather than a Christian American.
Yeah, it's kind of halfway there. Like, remember what I mentioned earlier about how I kind of looked into it, but not enough that it would throw off my faith. So it's like you're kind of halfway to getting the whole story. You just gotta look a little deeper.
Yeah, if we were talking about the Big Bang from his conception, yeah, absolutely. That kind of sounds like a story because that's definitely a story. I don't think that's what the literature actually says on it, but it's a complex topic. It's not super easy to digest.
No, and I'm no cosmologist or a scientist or anything, so it's like it's
tricky. I need to mention this. I keep forgetting to talk about this because 2 weeks ago I had a caller. Somebody asked about the electric universe theory. And I said I would get back to it. And I promise you, I'm still looking into it. I know I said I'd talk about it the next week, but I have a friend who does some work for CERN who is helping me look into this bizarre electric universe theory stuff. So maybe I'll get to that hopefully pretty soon and talk about that more. But anyway, I do have some more callers that I want to get to
I haven't
before.
heard of that.
Yeah, I hadn't either. It's a whole thing. And I definitely, I
Yeah.
still need to look into it more before I can talk about it. But let's go ahead and get to our next couple calls here. This is Mikey calling in from Finland. We're going all around the world today. Germany, Australia, now we're at Finland. What's going on, Mikey?
Yeah, what's up? Hello, Erin and
Hi.
Dan.
Yeah, what's going on today?
About the last call. Well, never mind. I think you want to get on with the show. So,
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, Dan, you have been talking about antinatalism. So,
Yes.
Can you please define the term and then what's your thoughts on it? And Erin, if you can continue on from that.
Yeah. Well, so it's something I guess I'm the only ACA host that talks about antinatalism. So I get all the antinatalism questions. In fact, I'd say as far as the emails I get just as much emails about antinatalism, probably more so than any other topic almost. I mean, like I get a lot of emails about people trying to talk about beliefs and stuff like that, but specific subjects like antinatalism seems to come up. I guess, like I said, I'm one of the only guys talking about it. But, I define it as it's a rejectionist philosophy. Okay. And it's this idea that when you are the choice to give birth is an ethical one, ultimately, at the end of the day. Like, hey, we've been talking about veganism a little bit, right? Eating animal products is an ethical choice that you could make, whether you decide to do that. Same thing with birth, right? Birth is an ethical choice. Yeah. So whether or not, you choose to make that decision, for me, I consider it an unethical choice. Okay. For me to, give life. And that seems kind of radical, but, I have a couple different arguments as to why. One is, ultimately it comes down to, I want to bring the least amount of suffering I can into the world. I want to lessen the amount of suffering. And if I'm bringing a new life into the world and there's a potential, not only is there a potential for suffering there, but I have to distribute my resources to that person, or somebody has to distribute resources to that person in order for them to have the best life that they can. And so if I'm giving birth to that, again, potential for suffering, if something catastrophic goes wrong, if I die or something, or my presumably partner in that situation dies. I don't know if it's a partner, maybe I'm in a poly family or something. I don't know, whatever. Things can go wrong that are out of my control. But also, like, if it's not going to be me giving my time, it's going to be somebody else. And so that's resources, that's food, that's time, that's energy that gets put into this, that could be used for other things. Now, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but in the United States, we have lots and lots of kids in the foster care system. So many kids that could have all be solved tomorrow for anybody that wanted to adopt kids, and wanted to, or wanted to have kids, chose to adopt instead of having kids on their own. And so it's my belief that it's more ethical to adopt if you really want to have kids than to have kids of your own, because again, like you're taking somebody out of that system. It's a better distribution of the resources that we have, and you're making what I would consider the ethical choice in that scenario. This is just my thoughts off the cuff, of course. I thought about writing more cohesive stuff about it, but there's a great book by Ken Coates that talks about it that you can find on Amazon about kind of the history of antinatalism. Kind of really goes back to Buddhist philosophy even, and goes from there. But yeah, I guess that's my take in summation, my sloppy take on antinatalism. So there you go. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. And I think I lost half of it because I think my connection is a bit wonky. But so does your take on antinatalism include only yourself or also other people? Yeah, so great question. Like, I mean, ethics ultimately involves other people, right? And so it would be unwise of me to say that we should enforce some sort of state policy that says everybody can't have children anymore. One, I don't think that's practical, because people have children sometimes when they don't even mean to, but also that it's not popular. It's way not popular. So many people want kids, and it's not only is it ingrained culturally and encouraged culturally for us to have kids, but there is kind of an instinct in us a little bit too to have kids. That's why we're here. And so, yeah, like it's not that I don't think that having kids is a nice thought in the sense that, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a son or a daughter and have somebody to raise, but there are other ways to kind of do that without giving new life, and that's why I'm a big advocate for adoption, although the process is lengthy. And again, not every family that adopts that kid's necessarily going to go to a great home either, but we have those kids out there, and there is kind of this problem. And I think the solution to that is more people adopting. And I wish people considered adoption as their first choice rather than being the thing that you do when you can't have kids or something. But yeah, it's out there. It's a take that's out there. I don't know if it's growing or if it stayed the same. I don't know. As secular nations, we tend to have a declining rate of birth compared to developing nations, and even Japan at some points in recent history has had a negative decline in birth because of our lifestyle and our freedom of choice, and realizing that, hey, we can have careers and not have kids and just live our lives just fine. So maybe we'll see more of it in the future. I don't know. But if you're having trouble listening to this now, Mikey, you can always watch the video recording and hear what I have to say about it. So does that satisfy your question?
Well, yeah, no. Well, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind me taking over your show, what does Erin think?
Right, of course. Yeah, what time is it? Like 4:00 in the morning in Finland right now? Like I can't even imagine what hour you're calling me from.
Something like that. Something like that. Yeah.
Can I make a couple comments on that?
Make some comments. Make some comments, Erin.
This is one topic that I wasn't even aware of. Like I do have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 kids. But since hearing a lot of the arguments that are made for it, I think that it's a controversial topic that needs to be at least put out there so people can make informed decisions, because I think I would have no way to prove this, but I feel like most people who have kids haven't heard the arguments. They're not making the decisions thinking that they're making an ethical decision. They're just going, like what you said, Dan, just kind of going through that the life phases, or you do this and then the next you do this. So
right.
I have to say, like, if I had heard that argument before, or maybe I wouldn't have, because I was still, a pretty strong believer at that time. Maybe that would have gone against something in me there. But even that, I feel like that's like they could be easily harmonized. But since I don't plan on having any more kids, and I think a part of that is because now I'm aware of this argument, and so there is definitely a need for the conversation to happen and for people to at least hear the arguments before they make the decision.
Yeah, I feel like I can't justify the action of having kids without having a reason that's selfish in one way or another. Like, oh, I want something that looks like me, or I want to have that experience.
Yeah, and honestly, when I think about having my kids, I'm like, oh, like what? When I had my kids, like they were all reasons that had nothing to do with ethics.
Yeah,
so it's like. Yeah. Of course, I have to disclosure. I love them, and I would do anything for them. I'm so glad I have them, but I had never even considered it before.
Yeah, I talked about this with Shannon Q one time. This wasn't on the show. This was off the air, and she was really grilling me. She was trying to say, like, "Oh, so do you think it was bad for me to have kids?" And it was just like, no, because I don't think that you understood things in the same way that I'm explaining to you now. Like, my purpose in this explanation is not to play the blame game with people, because humans have been doing this for as long as we've existed. It's understandable why people have kids, but understanding the philosophy that I have now and just the reasoning abilities that I have, I cannot compel myself to have kids and feel okay with that. And I think that there's other people, like you said, Erin, if that knew kind of some of these points, they'd probably agree. Right.
Well, even the people that I've met, like in my circle. So like I used to go to like the women's Bible studies and stuff. And like there's a lot of conversation around kids and people planning on having children. And I can tell you that I don't think it was ever brought up once. And that's a huge group of women who are sitting there conversing with each other. And does it ever come up whether it's ethical to go ahead and go through a pregnancy and have your own kids? It's not even on the agenda. So I think it's interesting to. I wonder how many people compelled by these arguments. I'm not sure. I kind of feel like I don't have much more say in it because I've done what I've done, and I don't plan on having any more. And I'm not sure if that was before. Actually, I'm pretty sure I had just I was two and done before I heard the arguments. But I think that if I could go back 10 years, I'm like, I wonder what would have happened for me if I would have heard those arguments, because I do find a lot of them compelling.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, at least be aware, at least know that this is a thing, and don't please, by all means, if your kids say, I'm speaking to parents out there, if your kids say they don't want to have kids, please don't pressure them into making a decision that they don't want to make. Yeah, that's
exactly it too. I have two kids. I have a daughter, and I just raising her with the awareness that she doesn't have to actually get married, have kids, and do the whole thing. It's the realizing that there is the option to not do that is something that I didn't realize. So I think it's an amazing kind of conversation to bring up. Like, do you have to get married? Do you have to have kids?
Shame people. We shame people for not having kids. Yeah, absolutely. Try being a young Christian woman. Yeah, be a young Christian woman in this country. And tell your congregation, I don't plan on having kids, and see what their response is. There's going to be at least one person that says it's your godly duty to have kids.
I cannot tell you how many times I was pressured to have more kids. Yeah. And so for me, I have other reasons why I don't have a whole bunch of kids. I have my own chronic health issues. So for me, the decision to have one was, a lot. The decision to have two was even harder. And you go to church and you go to different women's, and they tell you that, there's a lot of this idea that, like, if you're closing yourself off to having all of the children that God wants you to have,
you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong. And so like, that is on the opposite end of the antinatalism conversation. Like, they actually think that you're doing something morally good by having as many children as you can, because that, it's actually in the Bible to, go forward and multiply.
Yeah.
So it's a really important conversation, even if you're not going at it from an atheistic or anything kind of standpoint. Just bringing up the conversation. Like, do you think it's maybe you should adopt or think about adopting first, or like, just is there any like kind of low key ways we can have these conversations be brought up in those ultra conservative environments even?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see. I've never brought it amongst the conservative audience before. I'd have to see what they say. But we have some other calls. I want to get to two more before we get to the end here. Mikey, thanks so much for calling from Finland. Hey, bud, get some sleep, man. I'm worrying about you, dude, because it's probably pretty late over there. So. Well, cool. You have a good one. Thanks again for calling. Let's go ahead and wrap up the show. Again, got two more calls I want to get to. So let's see what we can do. Sam calling in from North Carolina. You're live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
How's it going, y'all?
Going pretty good. Having a good night.
Sweet. Yeah, I am an atheist, and I'm working on an argument right now against the idea of Satan at all. Obviously, I don't believe in any of it, but I try.
You mean the existence of Satan?
Evidence is, the existence of Satan.
Okay.
So if you look into like Christian lore and who Satan was, it just doesn't make any sense. So you have to. So Satan rebelled against God, which doesn't make sense because Satan would know how powerful God was, knowing he could not be defeated. That doesn't make sense. Satan also convinced half the pantheon of heaven to also rebel against God, who also all knew how powerful God was, and they also rebelled. And I just don't see why you would do that if you knew that God knew everything you were going to do in the first place.
Yeah.
The whole Satan tempting Jesus didn't make sense because Satan knows Jesus is God. So why would Satan tempt God to sin? It's just mind-boggling bullcrap, to be honest. But I'm trying to build a good list of things, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were on those arguments.
Well, if you're just taking a biblical point of view on the character of Satan, first of all, you have to recognize that the Jewish people did not believe in Satan, at least the Satan that we have the concept of today. You can look at one of the oldest books of the Bible is the book of Job, and the book of Job has this character, the Satan, I think is how it's supposed to be, but it's kind of this lawyer character, sort of this prosecutor that's kind of putting God on trial for, you know, what his actions are and whether he does is good.
God, pretty much.
Kind of, yeah. And so this narrative of Satan falling from heaven and whatever, like, hey, Satan's like talking to God like they know each other at this point, and like I don't know, it's a whole thing. It's a very different concept, and you can also look at the ideas of heaven and hell. First of all, Jews don't believe in heaven either, or hell, not the same way that we do. So, like, you know, that whole thing, that's a big kind of hole in it. But going to the New Testament, when they're talking about the figure that tempts Christ and stuff, you can make a causal connection between this figure and what they're talking about in the Old Testament. But like this, it's a lot of what we understand about Satan in the modern Christian context comes from the book of Revelation, right? And so the book of Revelation kind of gives a lot of Satan lore, you know, not just in his past, but also more specifically what he's going to do in the future, and kind of his motivations for his actions. And so, from a biblical standpoint, Satan is all over the place, and it's all these different figures that may or may not be the same thing. By the way, here's another example. The book of Genesis talks about the serpent. Okay. That nowhere says Satan. Does not say Satan. The fact that people call that Satan,
it doesn't at all.
Completely Christian idea. You know what it says about the serpent? It says that
when you're Christian.
No, it says that God cursed the serpent so that he'll crawl and eat dirt across the earth. It says that he'll do that. Satan's not doing that. Satan's supposed to be like in hell or wherever. He's not on the earth and crawling. They're talking about snakes. Like that's what it is, or at least what they think are snakes, because snakes don't eat dirt. But the point is, they call it. It's not even the same thing. So like we have these really loose ideas about Satan and what he is, and it's not coherent at all. There's no coherent idea of Satan that you can find across all the books of the Bible. So it doesn't even like to talk about its existence. We can't even really define its existence based on the source text that we're looking at, let alone whether or not there's a figure out tempting people and doing stuff in the world. It's really kind of bonkers.
Yeah, it really shakes your that is like one of the reasons why I walked away from the faith. That and having my kid, I was like, well, I love this kid more than God, so I'm already
there. You go.
Right there.
Wait, Sam, you're saying you wouldn't kill your kid for God? You wouldn't sacrifice your kid for God?
No, I'd probably kick God in the nuts if you asked me to.
Well,
I'm just being
honest. Better than Abraham.
There you go.
I appreciate y'all's response. I actually recommend Bart Ehrman's new book on heaven and hell, which kind of sent me down that whole rabbit hole, and I was just like, this Satan character, I'm getting like 15 different personalities, and none of them adding up in the whole.
Yeah, and some of them come from.
If God was. I'm sorry.
Later. Oh, I was just going to say, and like they cover such a wide span. It covers like, you know, some little tidbits from the New Testament. Some of it's from the, you know, the apocryphal books and like the, you know, apocryphon of Peter, or, you know, the other revelations that came about. Some of them happen in the medieval centuries, and like with Dante's Inferno, and you know, these extra biblical kind of fan fiction also plays into the role of what modern Christians, how they view the devil and his abilities are. So it's like, if you kind of have to go back and dismantle all of that and see where it started from, and seeing where it came from, you know, the Greek pantheons and that sort of thing too, and the Zoroastrian influence.
Yeah. If you've ever been scared by the idea of Satan, it's because of an idea somebody told you, and not because of the Bible. If your entire concept of Satan came from the Bible, like your idea of it would be very, very different. I'm sure. I mean, I guess the book of Revelation is kind of scary, but it's not like it's not the demons and the wings and the pitchforks that you see. That's all just
even the whole part about him. You know, there's a lot of, even like what you had mentioned about like the fault took the third of the angels. Is that even in the canonical? Like The Bible? I thought that was
might be in the Revelation or something. I think like it says something about the angels fell with him or something, or I might be just getting that from Christian.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a third of the angels from heaven sort of rebel, but also like the Mormon.
Follow this guy.
I'm getting this. This might be getting confused with the Mormon faith too, because the Mormons have some ideas about Satan and stuff, and I'm thinking maybe that's where it came from, and not. But I don't. It's been a minute since I've looked at Revelation too. It also it doesn't. The book. Look, listen. Nobody fucking knows what the book of Revelation. I don't care. I don't care who you talk to. Listen, you ask the biggest, the brightest minds in biblical scholarship, and ask them their opinions on the book of Revelation. They'll give you 100 different answers on what this stuff means. Okay,
yeah,
it's not profitable for your daily life. That's all I'm saying. There's better things you can read, you know. But anyway, Sam,
I brought it up in a debate. Oh yeah.
I was just gonna say,
I brought it up in a debate.
Yeah, finish your thought.
The guy just had no answer. Oh, just nobody ever had an answer for it, is what I was saying. It was like I was wondering if it was like a good make you think about your faith question.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the goal, right? But anyway, Sam.
Sorry.
We got to wrap things up. Sorry, we're kind of running low on time here. But Sam, thanks for calling in. Hopefully I dropped in some good info for you. Again, I've read the Bible. Read a lot of books about the Bible. I'm not a biblical scholar, but anything I'm telling you here, like you're going to find in the scholarship as well. You know, like that. It's all. You can find the origins of this stuff, and it's fascinating to see where it really comes from. It's never from what you expect, but yeah, never. Let's go ahead and wrap things up. I want to get to this last call while we have a couple more minutes here. I want to talk to Skyler calling in from Arkansas. Skyler, you made it at the tail end of Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Not much. I'm doing pretty good today. I hope you guys are staying healthy. Wanted to call in about something I was talking about with my mother earlier, and that she's not a believer. She's an atheist like me, but she does believe in fate and things happening for reasons, and that, you know, sometimes you find your soulmate and everything. And I was wondering, is that really considered spiritual? Is that a supernatural belief? Is that?
Yeah, I'd say so.
How to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, soulmate's not a Christian idea. So we could get if we're talking about a Christian spirituality, but yeah, like any ideas that involve some sort of plan for people, a fate. This is your soulmate. This is what you're meant to do. This is your purpose. That is supernatural by default, you know, and we don't always think about it that way because this is so common even amongst secular people who use language when describing these things. But you have to imagine that if there's a plan maker, you know, like there has to be some sort of design in that process. And that's a religious belief. That's a religious belief that I can't justify, and I don't think anybody else can justify. So yeah, I'd say that's supernatural by default.
I think that's great. That's a great answer. I was going to say something very similar.
I think so too, but it's like I understand kind of where she might be coming from. She's older. She was born in the 50s. So I think she understands some of these things, but she still holds on to these kind of older beliefs because of how she was raised in a very, very Christian household. But I don't blame her for that, but it's just, she doesn't think it's supernatural. She just calls it, I'm being spiritual. And I'm like, I think that might be fair enough. I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to bring her down.
I don't know about you, Dan, but like, I don't take much issue in that when somebody, if they are having some, you know, some sort of philosophy that they are working for their, you know, making their decisions, but if it's not like harmful and it doesn't seem to be that she's pushing anybody else to follow the same idea, I find a lot of like kind of pagan and other kind of spiritual practices like kind of beautiful. I don't personally practice them, but I can see how it would help. It would help a lot of people, but I don't know.
Well, so even just the word spiritual, I mean, spirits involve supernatural. First of all, I want to put that out there.
Yeah.
But like to your point though, Erin, you know, I struggle with this because, like I said, you know, the most secular liberal people I know still use this language and describe things, even though they may not literally believe in these sort of, you know, narratives. But a narrative constructed for your life can be a positive thing just as much as it can be a bad thing. So, for example, I mean, just going from a Christian perspective, I thought that God had a plan for my life, and I thought I was going to be working in some sort of Christian ministry. You know, and that turned out not to be the case for me. So when I lost my faith, I had nowhere to go, and so that narrative completely fell apart. So
that's true. Yeah.
And if somebody else comes to that conclusion, if they have a narrative in their head, hey, this is my soulmate, and that doesn't work out, that can be just as destructive. Because
totally devastating.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
That belief is influencing your actions.
I guess what I was kind of hearing with them talking about, like, it is what it is. Fate. Like I think I was kind of looking at that, but kind of almost from a more stoic kind of standpoint. Like that, I think there are ways to use very similar languages, but not maybe have a supernatural reference to it. But like I think that Dan has a really good kind of method for testing that out. It's like, do you believe that there's some sort of a plan, and if so, who's in charge of this plan? And then as soon as you kind of go there, then you're in supernatural territory, and then you're in the walking into the woods for some harmful ideologies.
Yeah, it's at the end of the day, these ideas are human egoism. You know, it's like why would I think that I'm special more than the 7 billion people that occupy this earth right now, let alone all the humans that have come before me? Like, of course I think I'm special. Everybody thinks that they're special on somewhere, you know, and that's true. You know, we're all unique, we're different, but like, I don't think I'm special enough to think that there's some sort of divine being out there that's watching from my every process. Because what does that say about the folks that just perished in Beirut recently? You know, to bring it out into some perspective, what does it say about the children that have died of malnutrition before the age of 5? What's the plan there for these people? Just to be a narrative in somebody else's story? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I can't pull that thread. Now there are some religions actually that will say that they deserved it for some reason or another, but like that's a whole other thing. So anyway,
I can't definitely, as you said, can't pull the string on fate because it's got too many implications behind it. Personally, for me, if you want to believe you're special or that there's a special someone out there, I'm not going to, hurt her feelings, because it's not harming anybody. It's not causing something else. But I'm just saying, I just wanted to point out, like, you need to be careful because at what point do you say something isn't fate? Because it's kind of like the heap of sand thing.
Well, it's hard. And all I can say to that is, does your parents or does your mother value truth? That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. Is something being true more meaningful and more important than something that feels good to them? And that's a decision you have to make, but also maybe it's good to ask them. And that determines how you have conversations with people. Yeah, not everybody I talk to is going to be worth my time in saying, like, yeah, what you believe is wrong. And here's why. Here's my 50-page dissertation. Like, one, that's not going to be always effective. But also, yeah, we're human beings with only so much time on our hands. We got to pick our battles, So, yeah, I agree with you. Not the harm may be minimal, but if a belief is false, I mean, there's always some risk of harm. There's always some risk of harm. I
don't want to, to seriously impact her life. She's 68 now. I don't want to potentially diminish her life when she's potentially in her sunset years. I'm trying to be as respectful as I can, but I was saying she does respect truth, but I think there are just some ideas that you just can't knock out of her head at this point. And that's why I'm trying to just to find out where that line is to be as respectful as possible, because there's no reason to push it and cause unnecessary arguments. If there are just some things you won't be able to argue.
As long as she's not making, if she's not making policy decisions, then you're probably good, right?
Sometimes you do have to just pick your battles and choose the relationship over.
Right. If you love your family, if you respect them, sometimes there are just things you need to let go and let live. But thank you for taking my call. I appreciate you guys a bunch. I love watching your show every week.
Thank you, Skyler. Thank you.
Calling.
Appreciate the call. Very nice way to end tonight's episode of Truth Wanted. But we're not quite finished, folks, because if you're watching this live, you can join us in just a second in the Discord after show, which is something that we do every week. And I thought about doing something kind of new. So I don't typically give out which guests I have upcoming and stuff, but I've been thinking about it and thinking maybe to get some more people to come on, maybe I can tease next week's guest and the after show to entice you guys to come on and figure out who it is. And next week is going to be a juicy one. So if you're watching live, get ready to come on the after show. Erin will be joining me to take some questions.
And Mikey.
And the dog.
I forgot to bring her on earlier.
Well, that is a dog. That is a beautiful dog. And we're a pro pet.
I just woke her up from her nap.
Look at that. We're a pro pet show on this little production. So yes, Erin, I want to give you so many thank yous for coming on today. Really appreciate you celebrating your 1 year deconversion with me. Really awesome you got to be here.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was, I also feel honored that you asked me. I'm nervous, but I was excited. And I thank you guys so much for letting me be a part of this. This is literally a dream come true for me. I cannot believe that 1 year ago I was watching these. And today I've been on one of the episodes. It's amazing.
Heck yeah. Started from the bottom. Now you're here, baby. Woo. So Erin, if people want to find you and see what you're up to, where should they go to do that?
Right now, I'm just on Twitter. I do all of my rants and ravings on Twitter. I actually try to have a lot of civil conversations. I think I've met a lot of great people on there. But right now, just at Exxtian or Exxtian Erin on Twitter. Someday, maybe more, but that's all for now.
Yeah, she's got that fancy font on Twitter. You'll know it when you see it. You'll know what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool. And I'm on Twitter as well. I am at ObjectivelyDan, and this show is Truth Wanted. You can find this on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. So please like, subscribe, rate, do whatever you can to help boost the show. And if you want to talk about this show, again, you can talk about it with me on Twitter, but you can also join our Truth Wanted Facebook group. And of course, our ACA Discord is another way to do it. And I have an email address. The email is truth@atheist-community.org. I look at all of those. So any show related business, or you just have a question for me you want to know, go ahead and send it my way. Love hearing from you guys. Emails have been a bit more sparse lately, but I read them all and I try to respond to everything that you guys send me. So thank you guys for keeping up correspondence. It really is fun. And also, hey, consider donating on Patreon too. But if Patreon's not your bag, we also got some merch as well. We got a cool little site. Now we need to get a shirt that says, what was the phrase we used? Educated hater. Educated hater. Let's see if we can put that in the store. I was thinking today too, like we need to get something with Pico, my cat's face on it, on the store too. I think some Pico merch would be cool. We'll see what we do with that. But yeah, check out the merch if you haven't already. Last but never not least, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the wonderful crew that helped make this production possible every single week. There's some of the crew right now doing some crazy camera effects there. And also cats. And kitties. Love our kitties here on Truth Wanted. So Erin, if you could travel back in time, where would you go?
If If I could travel back in time, in my lifetime or forever?
Forever, from now until the Big Bang.
Ooh, I think you know what? For a long time, I thought I'd like to go back to the Persian Empire. They seem pretty dope.
Okay. That's interesting. What do you imagine would happen if you turned up in the Persian Empire? I'm curious now.
I just thought their gardens and their chilling out all day by the waters and the paradise. That seemed pretty cool.
Just want to check out the gardens.
You know what? That's probably not my
scenes.
official answer, but that's just the first one that came to mind.
Okay, well that's the truth.
By the garden.
That's the truth on Erin's take on where she would go in time, but you should remember to always keep wanting the truth. Yes, I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?